All right, here we are for the second week of the leadership bonus of the Gift of You course. Hi, I'm Nella Leary. I'm so glad you're here. So in week one, we covered the who, the what, the where, the when, the how, the why. All those basic questions about getting your group together, getting it up and running. The second week, we're going to focus on two different things. The first one is female dynamics, something that we encounter as leaders of groups and something we want to work positively with and get our hands around so we're ready to address the issues that arise. And the second thing we'll talk about in this video is your very first meeting, how you approach it, how you guide it, what your follow-through is, and all that. I've been leading Blessed Conversation groups for a few years now. I've hosted a number of Blessed Brunches at my home, and between my observations and the many women I've been helping lead and guide groups, I was able to come up with 4 archetypal female roles that you and I may encounter when we're in a group of women. Now, this group of women could be 3 women, it could be 30 women, it could be 300 women, but these 4 roles capture kind of a one-dimensional, maybe 2-dimensional view of a person in hyperbole. What that means is these are the people with all, this is a personality with all the characteristics that you might encounter. So we have the dominant, the free spirit, the reluctant, and the holy roller. Obviously, not one person is going to be all of these things. And certainly, they aren't created after one particular person in my group or in many groups of women I've been helping. They're kind of an amalgamation of characteristics centered around a featured characteristic of that woman. And our whole point in coming up with these 4 archetypal roles is to help us be able to identify, diffuse, redirect, to have that beautiful, authentic sisterhood we've been talking about throughout this course. It's really hard to do that if you feel like your group is a runaway train and you're not sure how to redirect and steer the personalities to help it continue to stay on track and eventually get to its destination, which is a beautiful, supportive community. And then on to your first meeting. All the prep, all the nerves, all the anticipation, all the coordination that's gone into it. These are just a few tips to help you feel like you're starting out on the right foot. You're starting out armed with confidence and grace. You're starting out with a basic idea of how you want that meeting to go and how you want that meeting and future meetings to flow for the women that you're serving. All right, our first archetypal role is the dominant. Now, the dominant is a woman who comes in and seems like she could even be leading the group. Maybe you feel like she wants to be leading the group. As conversation unfolds, she tends to turn the conversation back toward herself. When people bring up discussion points, she relates it back to her life. She might be a bit of a know-it-all. She might use language that's not as uplifting to other people. She may be a person who seems to struggle with keeping her tongue in her mouth if she disagrees. She could be a person who either creates conflict or doesn't shy away from it. The dominant person speaks in definitive statements every step of the way. There's not a lot of room for you as the leader to massage and maneuver and mold what she says so that it can stay palatable for her large group. The dominant person often isn't aware that she even comes across this way. When she's talking a lot, she might not even know that her talking and taking up so much space in the conversation leaves little to no room for anyone else in the group. The dominant personality. Now we've talked about the general characteristics, but when you think of the dominant personality, I want you to close your eyes and go through your mental roster of all the women in your life who have this characteristic. Now pick one that seems to have it more than others and kind of
use your creative imagination. Fluff out that characteristic in that person. Think of how she would respond fictionally to all these different circumstances you might encounter. Really visualize her engaging with your group. Now that you have that actual person in mind, that can help you understand and unpack when you face the dominant personality in your living room, in the library, at the park with your group. So think about it. Give yourself a chance to have a little aha moment so you can understand it's not just a list of characteristics, it's actually a person you've encountered in your own life.
All right, our second archetypal female role is the reluctant. Now, maybe the reluctant was invited to your group by someone else. Maybe they signed up for the group but aren't quite sure. They could be a more shy or introverted person. Perhaps they don't participate in the group discussion. As you pose the questions and kind of lead off to discussion from those questions, the reluctant might not even register anything on their face. You can't tell if they're engaged, upset, overjoyed, bemused. They're really hard to read. When they do share, they might tend to share in generalities or platitudes and not actually speak vulnerably or about their own experience. The reluctant is a person who could take a ton of offense at something said and you wouldn't even know it. So if the reluctant stops showing up to your group, you might not even be sure what happened.
Now, when you think on the reluctant, especially if it's a person who is introverted and harder to read, I want you to think worst case scenario with a reluctant person. What's the worst thing that could happen in your group with somebody with this personality? They probably wouldn't have a big outburst, right? That might be maybe the free spirit or the dominant or even the holy roller. But what's the worst case scenario? With the reluctant, it's probably that they would leave feeling awful and you have no idea. So when you're handling the reluctant person, that might be somebody you follow up with individually. Hey, just want to make sure everything went okay at the meeting for you. Sorry we didn't get a chance to touch base. Let me know if there's anything that I can do differently or better. Can't wait to see you next time. Or even do make sure that, as people are getting ready to leave, you do have a step aside with them and you say, how'd it go for you tonight? How are you? I saw you posted that thing. How's that going for you? That one-on-one connection with them can make the difference. It might mean that they feel like they can open up and tell you, yeah, I didn't like this, or yeah, this is going on in my life. Try to have a meaningful connection with the reluctant person. It will make all the difference in how your group works.
All right, our third archetypal role is the holy roller. Now, the holy roller is someone who comes in and is delighted to be in a Catholic group. They know that Blessed is She is an Orthodox Catholic women's ministry. They are aware of Bishop Olmsted endorsement. They know we have the imprimatur on various of our documents and books and publications. And they come in sure that everyone is on the same page as they are about their faith. They come in assured that everyone is on the faith journey in the same way. Some of their language they use may be judgmental or hurtful, probably not intentionally, but the strength and oomph with which they speak can cause others to shut down. Now, the holy roller could have an advanced degree in theology, or it could be not well catechized at all. It's not even about the qualifications of the person, more about the spirit that they bring to the group. Less spirit of cooperation and more spirit of looking for or wanting to be an authoritarian voice of the church. The holy roller might be a person that's actually very wounded in their own story, and they're clinging to being extremely definitive to mask some of that pain. The holy roller is a person that you're delighted to see present, but you really hope you can negotiate with and diffuse to ensure that women on all walks of their faith journey are able to stay in the discussion and able to stay plugged in.
And if you do have a holy roller in the group, I want you to remember that people who speak with great authority on things that they maybe necessarily aren't even authorities on, especially when it comes to theological stuff, they often are doing it as an overcompensation because of their own pain and suffering. So as tempting as it might be to really want to shut her down because her comments are hurtful, or they just don't add, or maybe they're not as theologically accurate as she thinks, she might be a person that you can touch base with that spiritual director about or with that pastor about as she brings up things and divert the conversation where she wants to lay down the law on someone and say, that is such a great question. That is a wonderful topic for when we follow up with Father so-and-so. Or, I'm going to bring that. I'm going to bring that discussion. Let's look at the catechism together. Why don't you bring the catechism next time? We have coffee, just us. Or come a little bit early and we can look through that together. You don't want to squash her enthusiasm, but you also don't want it to suffocate the rest of the group and everyone feels like she's delivering her personal theological thesis, again, that may not even be quite accurate. So look at that strength of love for learning and love for the church and try to find a way to have it work with the group instead of against the group.
Our last of these 4 role of woman that you might encounter in your group is the free spirit. Now, the free spirit is someone who is genuinely unaware and unbound by some social norms. So the free spirit might take the conversation and the direction of it totally off track. Not with any acrimony in her heart, but genuinely because she wasn't really clued in to where someone was going with a comment or where you were going with the direction of the questions. The free spirit might pose a new question and want the whole group to answer that question. The free spirit is a person who may be joyfully filled with ideas and thoughts you really wouldn't have come up with on your own. They bring a flair and a touch of the unexpected to your group. They can be very earnest, but a little bit in the clouds, if you will, less tethered to the literal and more in touch with the ethereal.
Now for the free spirit, I want you to remember that a group might not even really be her thing, especially if she's a person who doesn't necessarily fit the social mold or always pick up on social cues. So a group for her might be completely out of her element. As you set up the expectations and the boundaries and kind of give the parameters of the group, remember that those aren't being bossy or controlling. Those are really helpful for someone like the free spirit who wants to know what the format's going to be, what to expect from what people will share. And also keep in mind, you might have to help the free spirit find that personal boundary if you feel like they share so much it makes other people in the group uncomfortable. And take them aside. Give them a couple minutes at the end or at the beginning. Touch base with them outside of it, reminding them, gosh, I love how open you are, but some of those things I would love to have more of a just one-on-one time with you to discuss, to diffuse it and make her feel not attacked, but help her to navigate what could be topics that are making the group a little bit uncomfortable for other people.
I have 2 experiences to share with you ladies regarding the dominant personality and the free spirit personality. So I was in a group and the discussion table was starting to get a little prickly. One of the gals was sharing a very enthusiastic and dogmatic view on motherhood and on women when they are married, having children as soon as possible. So I think some of the nuance that tried to enter the conversation was about NFP and grave reasons and young marriage and how people are situated. And this woman, these nuances were lost on her. She had a very specific viewpoint on it, and she was sharing it quite definitively. After the discussion broke up, I spoke to one of the younger women who'd been at the table with me. I could see she was still very much journeying and grappling with this concept of children and motherhood and marriage. And it was a great opportunity to touch base with her, plant a few seeds about the church's teachings on it, but do so in a way that kept the conversation open and kept it invitational. While I tried to diffuse the best I could the discussion at the table, sometimes people just have to agree to disagree. And sometimes people need to be reminded that not everyone at the table is going to be exactly where they are. I think it worked out in that instance, and there weren't too many bruised feelings or uncomfortable moments. But that dominant personality, it really can affect people who are kind of on the fringe or learning still about the teachings of the church on matters that are really personal and really tender. So this is a while back for a group that I was running, this next example of the free spirit. One of the ladies in the group was a total free spirit. You could tell right away. She carried it in the way she walked and the way she talked and she interacted. She was almost floating, loved to engage with everyone, totally open heart right on her sleeve, no inhibitions. And as we were going around, answering a basic question about, maybe it was, where did you grow up? Or a fun memory from your younger years. Kind of the icebreaker that doesn't just go back to, are you married? How many kids do you have? That one, it can be tender, especially for women who have lost children or are struggling to conceive. So as we went around the room, this free spirit answered the question, but then in the middle of answering her own question, came up with a different question and was delighted and wanted to solicit input from all the ladies in the group about this question that had just come to her mind, sprung to the top of her mind while answering the question that everyone else is answering. Now, this new question was great and one that was perfect for our discussion later on. So simply affirming and realigning that question to later was my job as the leader. But it was a reminder to be flexible because this free spirit came up with something I never could have. And later in the discussion, it really did. It really did benefit the group. On the tail end of all of this about the women and the personalities you might be dealing with, you may be facing in your group, I want to touch on something that I think is often either overstated or understated, and that's self-care. So the world can overstate self-care, and it looks like GIFs and memes and hashtags and treat yourself and a reason to get another mocha frappuccino or a manicure or take a personal day. And that minimizes it and it makes it look like self-care is simply trendy. It's a millennial trend. It's like millennial rose. That's simply not true. We know as Catholic women that caring for ourselves as our bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit is really important. We've said throughout this whole course, we can't give what we don't have. And giving to these women in this group, holding their prayer intentions in your heart, even carving out the time to send those thoughtful emails, catching up, creating a space that's beautiful and welcoming to them. All of that takes a lot of energy. And self-care, so that you can do that, is a really important component of this. So let's look at 3 ways that we can perform some needed and meaningful self-care as Catholic leaders. The first one, you know this is coming, right? Spiritual self-care. How are you tending to your spiritual life? Are you on spiritual life support? Hey, I've run groups while on spiritual life support. I got to tell you, it's the worst. Constantly feeling in doubt, constantly feeling like I'm a fraud or a failure, or I shouldn't go, or I shouldn't come, or wish it wasn't happening. And then, of course, when I get there, realizing this is exactly what I needed. But how do we care for ourselves in a spiritual sense? How do we nurture our spiritual life while doing the millions of other things that I know you're doing? I know you're so busy, friend. The first thing always is to avail ourselves of the incredible graces offered by the church through the sacraments. Ladies, we can go and receive our Lord in the Blessed Sacrament every day if possible. We can receive the healing balm of the sacrament of penance and confession, reconciliation, whichever term you use, as much as need be. We can go to an adoration chapel and visit our Lord in the Blessed Sacrament, carving out that special time for prayer. All those graces. It's available to us. Now, if you're like me, I'm sure it's hard to make time in our schedule. But when you're leading groups and you're leading women, it's not about making the time. It's really a necessity. We must find that time. If you have a spiritual director or advisor, spending the time to plug in with them, drawing upon all the grace and love that our Lord and his ministers want to provide to us is our number one priority in the realm of self-care. All right, number 2 for self-care is having someone who you can vent to, someone who you can process with, someone who's outside your group, but totally aware and plugged in with what you're doing and what your goals are and what you're trying to achieve with these women. Someone you can dump and sort it all out with. Someone who understands the beauty of the obligation you put on yourself. Someone who's not going to say, well, why don't you just stop? It seems like you're always complaining about it. It seems like it's so much. So maybe that's your boyfriend or your husband or your sister or your best friend or your mom or your aunt or some trusted person in your life. Now, in our groups, of course, we respect the confidentiality. So we're not talking about sharing and processing other people's challenges and issues with this person. We're talking about your own. Getting the encouragement, getting the affirmation that you might need, getting the time and space to be able to say, I'm not sure I can do this anymore. Or I need a reminder of why I do this. Or can you help me figure out a better time or a better format? Someone who can be your sounding board. That person, for me and for many of the women I've been helping lead groups, is so critical for a leader's self-care. All right, the last way that we can do self-care as group leaders. Ladies, this is really basic. Rest and hydrate. Now, I know I sound like your mom, right? Are you getting enough sleep? Are you drinking enough water? But there's so much wisdom there. There's no way we can all get the prescribed amount of sleep per night. But maybe we can try to hit those numbers. What is it now? 8 hours of sleep? 9 or 10 would be amazing, but let's not get crazy. Getting at least 8 hours of sleep a couple nights a week. Sleep is so restorative. It's so important for our mental health, our physical health, our emotional health. When we aren't sleeping, we're burning the candle at both ends. We burn out. That wick we just burn out. And maybe you're a big coffee drinker or a big tea drinker, or maybe you love soda, or maybe you love kombucha, but water still remains one of the most important ways to nourish our bodies, staying completely hydrated. Remember, sometimes even when we think that we're hungry, we actually might be dehydrated. Sometimes when we feel really, really lethargic, we may be dehydrated. And if you live in the frozen tundra like me in Minnesota, man, the air is dry. I need extra water. So I don't know now if they tell us, what is it? Is it still 8 cups? Something tells me they either lowered or raised that number. But whatever the amount of water is a day that you're able to guzzle down, whether it's slightly fizzy or, a little bit of lemon or lime or some kind of mint or flavoring so you can keep it down, hydration really is important. So rest and hydration, caring for your body so you don't burn out, so you can keep on giving to these ladies. These are really important parts of self-care. It's time. We're talking about your first meeting. Now, I don't care if you have 50 women or you have 3. The first meeting sets the tone for the rest of your meetings. The first meeting is super important, and not in a high pressure, oh my goodness, I don't want to fail kind of way, but in a what's the way we're going to move forward? As it begins, so it continues. My godmother used to say, may she rest in peace. And it's true about everything, right? As it begins, so it continues. First meeting. Are you nervous? I'm always nervous when I start a first meeting for a group. I've been doing these groups for a long time. So if you are nervous, it's okay to feel nervous. I'll be nervous alongside you. All right, let's talk about the nitty-gritty of this very first meeting.
And just this quick pep talk for your first meeting, you set the tone. Your joy and enthusiasm and welcoming demeanor set the tone. Hey, you don't have to be a crazy extrovert, but you do want to smile and be engaging, ask people their names, make sure that they feel that you're happy they're there. It's always good to set reminders. People forget that not everyone is on the same path as them. So to say something about, we're all on our journey here, we might be in different places, we may come from different backgrounds, we could have different political views, that's a hot button that we want to avoid in our groups, right? So set those baselines for reminders, keep things people share here. We don't want to leave outside the group and carry with us basic decorum. You think you wouldn't have to say it, but you gotta say it out loud. You'd be surprised. Be surprised. Pace your meeting. So we talked about this before. Have a sense of what you're going to walk through in that hour to a 2-hour interval. You'd hate to feel rushed, and you'd hate to feel like we got really bogged down in discussion. We didn't get to do intercessory prayer. Or we spent so much time chatting and introduce ourselves in the beginning. We didn't really get to the study. Have mental benchmarks for when you want to be doing what. Now, the prayer aspect of the meeting. You don't have to be an amazing impromptu prayer person. You can open and close with rote Catholic prayers that we all know. And even for the intercessory prayer time, something as simple as saying, Dear God, we bring our prayers before you now. And everyone's got their heads bowed. People are invited to just say their intention aloud as they see fit. It really can be as simple as that. You might consider praying a hymn together or praying a song that you think people may know. There's no wrong way to do the prayer, but I would stick to at least a couple rote prayers that people will know so it's not too outside their comfort zone or their wheelhouse. Now, after you've had this wonderful first meeting, follow-up is important. Reach out to that email list, reach out to the people who came, thank them for coming. For those who weren't able to come, you can provide a little recap about what you guys did. Sometimes that enthusiasm will get them to come the next time. And make sure that you give them the next date to put on their calendar. People need like 15 reminders on dates. I mean, not everybody, but most of us do.
What another wonderful week. Ladies, it's such a joy to be here with you to talk about these nitty-gritty details of the personalities you may encounter in your group. Now, I've given you all of these tips for diffusing and redirecting, how to keep the conversation going, how to create the space for comfortable, beautiful, blossoming sisterhood. You know you can email me anytime, nell@blessedshe.net. I try to get back to you as soon as possible with whatever your concerns are, your doubts, your fears, your joys. I love hearing about the triumphs too, ladies, if you have those to share. Thank you for being part of this. I'm so grateful to be your guide on this amazing journey of leading Catholic women.